Hi, hello. Welcome back to another video. My life is not a minute in yet, so it's gone down the toilet. I'm having probably the worst time of my adult life. Let's start this over. Welcome back to another video. Today we're talking about the Tudors, because you know who can't hurt me? Dead people. What did the Tudors do in their free time? We're gonna start off with probably the least productive Tudor hobby, gambling. Why are we starting here? Because I didn't know where else to start and we had to start somewhere, so here we are. Gambling was honestly the same as it's always been. It was primarily an activity that men took part in. Both working class and upper class people gambled. Robert Dudley, Earl of Leicester, Elizabeth's favorite for a time, was an avid gambler. His household set aside money specifically for him to gamble away. He borrowed money from his staff and pages. We have accounts of the money that he lost, but never the money that he gained. Suspicious. Henry VIII was also a big gambler. He gambled on dominoes, cards, shovelboard, or shovegroat, which was it used to be called shove-a-penny. The concept is sort of like marbles. You take some coins and you slide them on a little board or table and you try to get them on a number marked on the table. I'm not explaining this one. You try to get them onto a number marked on the table and knock other people's coins away from certain numbers. It's adorable. This is bothering me. I'm gonna pin this back. Whoop. Where was I? I played marbles growing up and it's sort of the same concept. Henry VIII's government didn't actually approve of shovegroat because they believed people were spending too much time and money on it. People were gambling too much on it and it was taking them away from spending time on archery. I will get into archery later. Gambling was a way to show wealth, upholding status, showing that you had the money to throw away. The majority of this gambling was done on games that the Tudors played. So the Tudors played a lot of games. They played board games. They bowled. They played skittles, cards, dice games. Just like gambling, these games were played by all members of the social strata. There were public places that you could go to play games, pleasure districts where you could walk around, enjoy nature, practice archery. There were also other districts where you could go to find a drink, or bowl, or cockfight. London actually had public bowling alleys that you could go to. Both men and women could bowl. There were bowling alleys inside. A common feature in wealthier people's gardens were bowling greens, which were an outdoor area where people could bowl. A lot of aristocrats did not like bowling, not because of the game itself, but because of the gambling that went with it. Once again, we're back to gambling. Not surprising, but anyways. The indoor form of bowling was called skittles because the bowling pins were called skittles. Billiards, backgammon, fox and geese, card games, and dice games were all played and mostly gambled on in the Tudor times. As for more outdoor activities, archery was, I cannot stress how much archery was of the utmost importance to the English. They viewed the English longbow as their saving grace. It was so important to them. The longbow took a lot of time and training. Whoa. And gambling took a lot of time and energy away from practicing archery, which Tudor officials did not like. I cannot impose this notion upon you enough. Time not spent practicing archery is time wasted. This makes it sound like people were being forced by the government to practice a sport they didn't like, but actually archery was generally pretty popular with the people. It was fun for them. It was fun for them. You could get together with your buddies and compete just like any other sport. You gather your boys, you head to the butts, shoot some arrows. Henry VIII declared that all men below 60, except clergymen and judges, should practice with the longbow. Also, boys between the ages of 7 and 17 were provided with 2 arrows and a longbow and taught how to use them by their father or guardian. So that's a long span of time that a boy would practice the longbow. And sort of how people today start practicing gymnastics really young to sort of allow their spines and limbs to form to be really flexible once they're grown up. The boys who practiced with the longbow grew up with, it sounds really bad, but they developed deformed spines due to the absurdly heavy draw weight and strength it took to wield one of these longbows. Just the position that one has to be in to wield a longbow to its full extent is very unnatural. Tennis was a popular pastime. Very popular with Henry VIII. He was very much a fan of real or royal tennis, which is pretty similar to tennis today for the most part in terms of scoring, except in Tudor times, you would hit the ball high up onto a wall and do one of 3 goals up there. That sounds really fun. It sounds more fun than modern day tennis, especially if you don't have friends. Your girl has friends. Of course, I have friends. Tennis actually started in France as just a game of handball. After it gained popularity, England began producing their own tennis balls, but still relied heavily on France to import a ungodly amount of tennis balls. There's a record of 12,000 tennis balls being imported in a single month into England from France. Cannot tell you how much these people love tennis. Football. And when I say football, I do not mean American football. You know what I mean. Football was a really popular sport, especially at Shrovetide, which is a Christian holiday basically in preparation for Lent. Football was a little different than it is today. Instead of a field in which you play the game, it was played in the countryside between whole villages, and the goal was getting the ball back to your own village. I don't know why this surprises me, but people died at these events. If they didn't die, there were people who got seriously injured. Really, it was just because some people got way too intense, too into the game. We all know those people. We all know those people. Football had to be banned in Chester in 1540 because of the inconvenience it was causing. Stool ball was also played. I am not going to talk about this much because it was mainly a women's sport and it wasn't super intense. Just imagine really early cricket. Very simple game. Baiting. I don't want to talk about this. Baiting. There were bear baiting arenas. Because the Tudors believed in humoral theory, they believed that older bears had the blood humor which, when they matured, dried and hardened, and because of that, they thought that the flesh of these animals wasn't nutritional anymore the older the animal got. When they bear baited older bears, they thought they weren't doing anything wrong, since the bear had no use to them anymore. Along with cockfighting, and this is actually really sad, but they would tie a cockerel to a post with a 6-foot string and throw rocks at it, and whoever killed it got to keep the corpse. With cockfighting, it cost a penny to get in, so really cheap entertainment. Cockfighting also made its way into the royal court. Henry VIII had a cockpit at Whitehall and Greenwich, the former being really fancy, with 3-tiered seating and decorative beasts all around the room. There was also bull baiting, which was a little different in Tudor England than the rest of the world. They tied a bull up and let loose a pack of dogs on it, generally mastiffs. They would sometimes, if the bull became really popular, they would rig the fight so that the bull would win and keep the crowd happy. That might have meant sending in inexperienced, old, or unhealthy dogs to ensure that they wouldn't win the fight. Bear baiting was just a little different. Usually the bears wouldn't die because bears are really expensive, I'm gonna be honest. But before baiting the bears were expected to perform. Sometimes they were trained to dance. Hawking was also really, it was the fashion. It was a really big deal. Fun fact, medieval kings would sometimes keep their favorite falcon in their bedroom with them. This was not so much the case after the 16th century, but hawking and hunting was still a really popular hobby. And so were tournaments. Tournaments were the shit. Tournaments, especially during the Tudor times, were outrageous. The Tudors felt like they had a lot to prove. Being a new dynasty, they had to showboat and create a royal, mysterious sort of aura around them. As a result, especially during Elizabeth's time, tournaments and celebrations were really very lavish. Henry VIII spent a ridiculous amount of money, £4,000, which is like almost $4 million today, I'm pretty sure, on the celebrations and tournament for his first son's birth. Awkward when you know that he died a few weeks later. The most well-known event in the tournament were the jousts. 2 knights would run at each other on horseback, lances and a tilt between them to try to land a hit on the other or knock the other off their horse. We love jousting. We stand. Much better than any baiting. Henry VIII was super into jousting. It wasn't something that everyone did, mostly just knights and sons of nobles who were not the firstborn son, because running in these jousts allowed young men the opportunity to earn money and make a name for themselves. The Quinton was something, I gotta stop clapping. The Quinton was also something to be used for those who enjoy jousting. It used to be for the purpose of training knights with a lance, but during Tudor times, it was more just for fun during the holidays. The Quinton was a dummy, essentially, that stood on a post with a shield attached to it and a bag of sand on the other side, and it rotated. So the knight could practice running against it as if he was in a joust. You wanted to be fast enough because if you weren't, then the Quinton would swing around and hit you in the neck with the bag of sand. Fencing was another thing to be done. During Henry VIII's reign, Italian fencing masters dominated the fencing schools and had quite a following of students, and I can't stop thinking about Serial Pharrell while I'm talking about this, but they would hold displays called prizes where they could find new students. These prizes took place outside of inns. Don't ask me why. Maybe the inns were in a good location where a lot of people passed by. You could really sell your fencing skills, find new pupils. Usually 4 fencers were involved in the display. Wrestling was a sport for everyone. Rich, poor, did not matter. The French and English wrestled at the Field of Cloth of Gold. Henry VIII famously lost to Francis I. first, a lot of sports, very sporty people. As for more indoor activities, I'm gonna change how I sit. As for more indoor activities, there was always dancing. Once again, you didn't have to be fancy to dance. There were dances at court, there were dances in the countryside. As for the different types of dances, in court there was the pavane. You could wear long dresses and hats and even gloves during this dance. Elizabeth I enjoyed this one. It involves dancing in couples. Another dance was the base dance, which is sort of similar to the pavane in that it was a processional style dance and you danced it in couples. My personal favorite is the volta. It is more lively than the other two I mentioned. It really just brings you back to the good old days. What's that stupid? Only 1570s kids remember the volta. There were other lively dances too. The galliard, saint-passe, and the coranto. Please search some of these dances. They are so much fun to watch. I want to dance the volta with someone. If he can't dance the volta, he's out the goddamn window. Country dances were also sometimes danced in court, but among the common people, the music was more simple, just a couple instruments, maybe a pipe, bagpipe, fiddle, and some drums. And they were danced, you guessed it, at taverns, in the streets. If you lived in a village, you danced in the field. The world is your ballroom. Dancing was an intimate space to be in. If you were gonna flirt with a girl, a dance would be the ideal time to whip that shit out. Mostly young people danced. At court, with some more somber dances, that could change and older courtiers could take part, but for the most part, dancing was a young man's game. In the countryside, there was something called Morris dancing, which, again, please search this stuff, I'm begging you. It is so much fun to watch. It's so lively. There was a crowd in Suffolk that dared a woman to dance beside this man all the way to the next town, and she did it. There were dance competitions in London. There were dance competitions in London where women would dance for garlands, but it seems like society was very well acclimated to dancing. There were Puritans who didn't like certain forms of dancing, but overall dancing was an accepted part of society and a legitimate pastime. Elizabeth I danced till she died. Age did not stop this woman from cranking out a few galliards. Music was also very important to the Tudor experience. You would be expected to know certain songs, be able to join in when a madrigal was being sung. Surprisingly, English music teachers were very desirable on the continent. I don't know why this is so surprising to me. Anyways, Henry VIII played the lute. He had 26 lutes, the organ, the recorder, the harp, and the flute, and also wrote Greensleeves. I don't want to get copyrighted by Henry VIII, but it goes a little something like this. Do 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 do. I know you know it. Mary I played lute, virginal, and harpsichord, and Elizabeth I also played the virginal and the lute. Very musical family. Very musical family. Also, fun fact, a lot of barbers would keep a lute in their place of business for customers to use during their wait. If you were feeling bored, the theater was a good place for entertainment. Popular theme for plays in England was the story of everything, I guess. Just from creation to doomsday was a very popular theme. Other than Shakespeare, there were traveling troupes of actors who put on pageants, which were small pieces of a bigger whole, which was called the play. And they put on these pageants on pageant carts, which were, how do I even explain this? It's this thing. It's on wheels. It's a little stage. You get the gist. There were, like the Globe, theaters that were not built on wheels. Before the construction of theaters, which were built specifically for plays, most plays were performed in or in front of inns. In or in front of inns. The majority of people loved plays. Some popular plays that you might want to see if you're in Tudor England are The Spanish Tragedy by Thomas Kyd and Christopher Marlowe's Dr. Faustus. Plays were put on very often. The Rose Theatre put on 6 different plays a week. A lot of thought and effort was put into, of all things, the clothing. There were props, absolutely. There were props, there were backdrops, but the clothing was the most important part to the actors and the audience. A good chunk of money was spent on clothing for the actors. The Rose Theatre owned cloth of gold and silver, which was only supposed to be meant for the royal family, and a scarlet gown with ermine, so you know they weren't fucking around. Reading, my fave. Reading was beginning to be more accessible. This did not by any means equal, literacy rates going up or anything. It's just because of the printing press that people who could read were able to get a hold of more books. Books began being published increasingly in English to sort of reach a wider audience, whereas they had been not exclusively, but mostly in Latin beforehand. Anyways, aristocrats were more in the habit of reading, having been educated to do so in their childhood. If you were not in a religious field or an aristocrat, you didn't need to know it. you did not need to know how to read. That was of no use to you. Henry VIII read a lot, and we still have some annotated books from him. And Elizabeth I loved reading. After getting some bad news from France, she read and translated Boethius's On the Consolation of Philosophy. Little one-page ballads were also sold. They basically were little tabloids and had quite a few stories about crime, some oddities, religion, love, stuff like that, as well as classics were really popular among those who did read. Which brings us to a grinding halt. That is the end of this video. There were other hobbies that the Tudors had. I just tried to give a sense of the really popular ones. If I had to say which was the most popular Tudor pastime, I would have to put my money on dancing. And why not? Their dances look so fun. Someone dance with me. Anyways, do you have any hobbies in common with the Tudors? I don't have many. They were very sporty, which is not necessarily my jam. Alright, I'm gonna put a stop to this. Alright, let me close this up. Ah! Thank you for watching. Have a good day. Have a good life. Bye.